Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can also listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you want to find us, you can. And if all that fails, you can also find us on our website, www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And what we do is each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Jeremy Kirkus with the Jeremy Kirkus Consulting Group. And Jeremy, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. If you listen to it, you'll be able to hear Jeremy. Mm-hmm. I should mention that Jeremy Kirkus is the co-founder of the Jeremy Kirkus Consulting Group. He earned a MA degree in organizational and industrial psychology. Is in the process of attaining his doctorate in the same field. And guess what? In your spare time, I'll say that in the spare time.
Yeah.
I love what he's dedicated to helping businesses thrive. And the first question I always ask a guest, Jeremy, is: as a child, you grew up where?
Montreal, Canada.
Okay, and so you were a boy growing up in Montreal, Canada. Did you always know you wanted to be in this helping business and working with businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Business was always forefront for us. We grew up in first of all, Blaine, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your audience and everything. So much fun to be here. So we grew up in an entrepreneurial family. Everybody around us is entrepreneurs. Everybody around us was all about business. What was
the family business?
So everybody had their own businesses. Primarily, my father had like a clothing store of several clothing stores. My mom was into education. So she had like an educational system going on. She would also help my dad with his business, obviously. And then my grandmother was in the restaurant business. My grandfather was a jeweler, and so on and so forth. So lots of businesses that I was raised around of. So it was really cool.
What was the first business you got involved in?
Lemonade stands.
Okay.
9 years old, 10 years old.
9 years old. Do you remember it?
Absolutely.
Now, I'm looking, I'm a little disappointed. I see in the background, you're working out of your home, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a framed dollar bill or the first dollar you ever made from a lemonade stand.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not the typical person that keeps that or anything like that. I used to have in my previous house before this, I used to have something called the wall of narcissism.
I love
all my degrees and all my, but didn't get a chance to. We actually just moved here, so didn't get. You see, the things are still waiting to get hung up. But yeah.
Well, it's funny you said that because same thing too. I used to have a kind of wall, but I don't anymore. I don't even want to put it up. Maybe put up one or two things. I don't need to have. I had like every certificate I ever got from second grade or something, and it means nothing. But in the wall, though, I'd love to see. Do you have a picture of you as a kid in front of a lemonade stand?
No, I don't. I unfortunately don't. So, well, the thing is that the truth is, here's the funny story. So we have what's called the talk when we're little kids. This is, yeah. So we're like about 9, 10, 11, around that ballpark. Mom and dad, or mom or dad, whichever it is in whatever situation. In my particular case, it was mom. She sits me down for what's known as the talk in our family. And what that typically is, and it goes something along the lines of, you have to make a living, right? You have to earn your living, things are not for free. You have to start up a business. Business is the way to go, all that kind of stuff. And then that's how we were raised. And my mom tells me, well, typically kids your age, they start off with lemonade stands. That's typically how they do it. So I'm like, oh, really? Kids do that? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, how's it done? I'm like asking her questions. And she's like, well, you put a table and you do, you prepare the lemons and all that, the whole 9 yards. I'm like, wow, really? Okay, cool. Guess what I did? I went to the whole community, everybody that was around us. I went from, I told them, this is your corner. Went to the next kid, this is your corner, etc. I will provide you with the tables. I'll provide you with the lemonade. I franchised the whole thing.
Okay? How cool. This was your first business?
This was the first business.
Wow.
So my mom's like looking, and she's like, tell me, what do you like that? I was referring that you start up the table. I was like, I don't want to do the work. Let everybody else. I mean, if all the kids are doing it, why? Like,
How
So
long
that
did
was
that?
kind
How
of,
long did that last?
oh, not long.
Yeah.
I couldn't convince the kids to stay around.
You
The
know,
kids weren't working, so
by chance, are you folks still around?
no. Well, my dad is, not my mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we should do though is recreate,
Mhm.
get a picture of you in front of a lemonade stand so you could send it as a gift to your dad.
That'd be funny.
Here's what I
Mhm.
did, but that's too cool as a 9-year-old, and you didn't even know what franchising is, but you just intuitively knew that this was a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, if to be honest with you, Blaine, I interpret it as other kids do this. So I thought I get the other kids to do it. That's the way I interpret. That's the way I fully understood it. I didn't understand that if my mom would have said, "You go do it," that's what I would have done. But to me, it was like other kids do this. So in my head, that was business.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yep,
I mean, did
we're
you try to
a handful of them.
did you try to recruit them into this business?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
sisters. Yeah, I mean, my sisters are like the closest in age to me. My brothers are significantly younger, but my sisters, yeah. My
So,
sister has a similar story, by the way. I'm sorry if I'm
well,
tanging
no,
off.
it's great. I love it. So go from, and now you got me interested. So we'll digress. What was your sister's story?
So my sister does. So she was always into like cosmetics and stuff like this, and so she gets the talk right, and she figures out, oh, okay, cool. So she calls up literally all the big companies like L'Oreal and like all these like big companies, and she says, I'm doing a project for school. We're learning about entrepreneurship and stuff like this. Could you send me samples? And we were getting like DHL and like these big massive boxes full of these like cosmetic stuff right to the door. And she was like, she just like either was, I don't even know if she was selling them, giving them, I don't know what she was doing, but um I remember just the pallet, like the boxes coming to her house. So it was really
So,
funny.
so I can see now, I'm beginning to get this, the
Mhm.
entrepreneurial spirit of it. How'd you graduate then from being a 9 and 10-year-old to, I guess, maybe your first real business?
Right. So, well, let me preface a little bit first because that plays a big part in it. And as a little child, yeah, we were growing up in entrepreneurial and all these kind of things. There was a very, very strong value. But my grandmother in particular was also a very prominent community member, and philanthropy was a big deal in our community. Also, we were lucky enough to grow up in a community that was very diverse. There was all kinds of people, and there was a lot of opportunities to volunteer and to be a community member. So I just loved it so much that I would escape from school, from class, and I would go and try to volunteer in the soup kitchen and and all these kind of things in the pantries. I just love it. And the people that were there that were looking down, they're like, "Aren't you supposed to be in school?" And I'd be like, "Shh, don't tell the teachers. Like, school's boring." And so my teachers and my parents, my principal, they didn't want to punish a good behavior in a sense, but they need me in school. So they were like, listen, when you grow up, you could help people for a living. Like that's a legitimate job. And then for me, it's like, well, how does a restaurant kind of, like all the things that were around me. So in my head, it was kind of like, well, medicine, doctors is a legitimate job and they help people. So that was this thing of like, I wanted to find something of that nature to work in and to go into. So I tried my hand in medical school. Well, I got to pre-med, um, and I volunteered in an ambulance and stuff like this. But very quickly, I found that that was not my passion, and I decided that I was going to transfer into business. So it was just like the next department over, so it just made sense. And so I transferred to business, getting my bachelor's degree in business, and it was in marketing. And I figured, I'll never start up a marketing agency and compete with the big marketing giants. So I might as well partner up with them. And I just called up one of the marketing agencies and said, could I help you bring products to market? This way, all you guys have to do is marketing. I will help develop the products and everything that are going to be marketable. I found a niche. It was a very, very unique niche that they just had no access to. I had to study an entire language for it.
What
And
was that?
so I did it.
French?
It's actually Yiddish.
Yiddish?
Yeah, it's actually
Okay.
Yiddish.
But go back
So
to, so I got the 9-year-old, and so you eventually got to college. in between there, were you starting or running any
Oh yeah,
businesses?
always. Yeah. I was just looking for problems in school. So the way my mother raised us, there was never this thing of what will you be when you grow up?
Right.
That wasn't the question. My mom actually felt that was a disadvantage asking your child these questions. Rather, it was what problem would you like to solve when you grow older? So a child growing up doesn't seem to have problems, right? He has a roof over his head, hopefully, he's hopefully in a good family, stuff like this. So not many problems. So by asking that kind of question to your child, the kid opens up his eye. I always was looking for what could be wrong. Like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Where's the problem? Where's the this? For example, when I was in a little bit of older grade, we used to come to school a little bit early. And so breakfast was a problem. The school wasn't providing breakfast. And I was like, hey, if I go to Costco, buy a massive, box of cereal, put them in little baggies, I could sell that, and the school was providing milk, but not yummy Honey Nut Cheerios. So that's what I did.
So you were ahead of the time. I mean, this is like, breakfast for kids. Who would have thunk? But you were one of the first ones to develop that concept.
Mm-hmm.
So I love, by the way, something you just said. And I have to ask you, so you mentioned a book you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
Are some of these stories going to be in the book too?
No, not, I mean, well, the book was very particularly, so I'm not usually somebody who shares so much about my life, but rather like if I'm going to share any part of my life, it's typically for a lesson and really the benefit of somebody else. And so the book is all about many, many areas of my life where I was successful and I've accomplished what's called impossible dreams. My wife and I have this thing of like, if we ever hear that something is impossible, we look at each other and we say, challenge accepted. And so this particular story was how I met my wife. And it came after a lot of hardships in my life. And I decided that I was going to design myself this ideal life that I wanted to live. And I wanted to settle down with this quote unquote ideal woman that matches this quote unquote ideal life. And the story basically says that I was told that this woman doesn't exist. You'll never meet her. She doesn't, women are not like that. And, all the stuff that hear and whatever. And I was like, I'm going to go find her. And the whole story is basically how I did end up finding her, and basically using principles. And these are principles that I've used throughout my life. I currently use in my business. I use them everywhere. And then the third part of the book is to challenge the reader to make their story their own by taking the principles and applying it whichever way they see fit in their own life.
Well,
Everybody's journey is different.
But I love the concept, to the extent that when the book gets finished, let me know because we'll have you again on the show. Just talk about
Absolutely.
the book. I mean, I love the concept, even to the extent that you're telling these stories. I'd encourage you to think about revisiting some of this because some of these stories you just told me should be in the book. Especially
maybe in the next one.
No, but I'm
This
saying
one's already written.
even this one, the lemonade story,
Yeah.
is such a classic story, and it applies. How do you? You gave such good advice to people. How do you apply this to your life? And what you already taught me, the whole thing is look for problems and solve problems. You can solve problems. There's always going to be work for you or a job for you.
Sure.
What a great attitude. So is that what you've done all your life, trying to solve problems?
Always. Yeah. Always, always. Anytime, anyhow, anywhere. When you get to attune to it, when you're really always setting your mind to what is a problem and what problem can I solve. I forget who it was, but I think it was called 1 hour shot or 1 hour drink or some guy like that. He was the guy who made this multi-billion-dollar tiny little shot drink thing. And I one time heard him talk, and I heard his, a quote of him, and he said, "I could guarantee you $1 billion. If you ever want $1 billion, you want to be a billionaire, I promise you, and I could guarantee you that $1 billion." And the interviewer asks, "How?" And he says, "Solve $100 billion problem."
This is the same story. You ever hear of a guy? Is it Joe Sugarman or Joel Sugarman? Joel Sugarman. He was the guy who invented the Blue Beta sunglasses or something. Anyway,
Okay.
same story. I'm at a conference, and he says to everybody, he's a multimillionaire at the time, "Hey, do you want to make $1 million, not $1 billion?" Said, "Yeah, we do. And you have to swear to secrecy. They said the secret start with $3 million. So yeah, so your variation of what you said, solve a billion-dollar problem. But good advice. Talk a little bit about how you work with businesses then. So in other words, if somebody is listening to the show and they like where you're coming from, which I do, and they'd like to conceivably hire you, describe the process. In other words, how to find you and then what you do. So first of all, how do they find you if they want to
So
get more information?
LinkedIn is typically where I hang out. I often say LinkedIn's my office. So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn.
And talk about finding you on LinkedIn. How do they find you?
So just Yermi Kirkus is typically how you'd find me. So just type in my name. I'm probably the only Yermi Kirkus on LinkedIn.
And we should mention, if you can't read the name, spell it if you would, please.
So yeah, Yermi is Yermi, and then Kirkus is Kurkus.
Do you have a website also?
I do. It's myname.com. So Yermi.com, YermiKirkus.com.
So they can find you there as well, right?
They can, yes.
And if people find you, what are they contacting you for?
So typically it's going to be what typically ends up happening is most people who contact me are people who are considering on selling their businesses or purchasing a business, either because they want to start a business or it complements a service that they already do. So these are typically people who are reaching out to me and who want to speak to me. There's two benefits to speaking to me. Number one is the secrecy. So we're confidential. There are many people who don't want to be in town square yelling out, "Hey guys, I'm selling a business. You should all know." So I'm very known for my anonymity and my confidentiality agreements. So a lot of people come to me to speak about that. The second thing is that we really have a unique approach where we focus primarily on the people. Well, there's three areas that we focus on. So we focus on the systems of the business, the people who operate, run, and everything that is associated to people in the business, and then the finances of the business. And the hyper focus is on the people because the other two sort of depend on this centerpiece. So that unique approach, we look at everything from the leadership all the way to the vendors and all the way to the customers. So everybody, people related, we're paying attention to them because we believe that with the right people, you can have the best operating system, but then they operate the system the best way. And then with the right people, you are investing your finances in the right places. And if you're not, then the business has a problem.
Excuse me a second here. So you mentioned we. Talk about we is you with the company.
So yeah, so we're actually a team of 5. We're a team of 5. We have different areas of expertise, and we also have like an extended network and a resource kind of center in a sense of let's say professions and professionals as needed to bring in. I usually like to say that not only am I the smoke detector, making sure that everything's okay in the business. I hate being the fireman, but I'm also like the tower control of the airlines, like telling everybody where to go kind of thing. So we have access to a lot of really great professionals, and we all come together as a team to increase the value of the business in a sense.
And when you're working with somebody, you told me off the air, you can do it, I guess, 2 ways. One, you can work with them via Zoom, like you and I are working now.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned now, fortunately, we're somewhat out of COVID. You also go out to businesses and work with them one-on-one?
Yeah. So the best way to do it is obviously the one-on-one component. That gives us like boots on the ground, because simply we don't see ourselves, like I personally, I don't see myself as a coach. I don't see myself as a consultant. When I get involved with businesses, I'm on a partnership level. So I get like really, very involved in every aspect of whatever it takes to make sure that the client really gets what they're paying for in a sense, and particularly that we're really increasing that value. We typically have a promise, like we try not to promise, but we could fall back on scientific and research that we could pretty much promise 30 to 40% increase on the business's value through this approach that we take, because it's based on research, it's based on science that science says that 30 to 40% of increase should be seen.
Well, that's kind of what you said too, and if you can elaborate a little bit on it, is the idea that up front you're not a coach. So a lot of people hire coaches, and my experience is a lot of people sometimes get disappointed with the results from coaches.
Sure.
I guess part of the problem is maybe they're looking for the wrong thing, or they don't have the right expectation.
Well, I think coaches are great, and I think consultants are great. We have a whole team of them that work with us. They're phenomenal people. A lot of them extremely educated, extremely knowledgeable, and a lot of them also very with a lot of experience in the field. However, my approach is a little bit different. I'm not that guy who's like the teacher. I'm not that guy who's going to come there and tell you, hey, research says that and you should do such and such. Just not my style. Not my I'm a hands-on guy. So I like to be part of the negotiations. I like to be part of the figuring things out. I like to be part of the meetings. I love to be like literally what you would expect out of a partner. If you started up a business with a partner, what would you expect from that partner? That I just get for me, I get my kick out of that.
How do you learn all this stuff?
So how did I learn it?
Yeah.
Number one, my grandmother. That was the woman who had the most amount of influence on me. This is a woman who never learned how to read or write, believe it or not. She was born during the war era. She just, for whatever circumstances, for whatever situation, she never had the privilege to get educated, typical, people like you and I have. So this is a woman who never learned how to ever read or write, yet managed to build extremely successful, incredible businesses. And I would always ask her, and we used to call her Safta, and we say, Safta, how did you do it? How did you do it? Or anytime that we struggled with something or we had a challenge with something, she would yell at us and she would say, do you know how to read? Do you know how to write? And that was like point taken, but a lot of she really influenced a lot. I would always ask her questions. And I mean, somebody who didn't know how to read or write and build a successful
Pretty
business
cool.
has something to offer. You know what I mean? I often say she's the most wisest, most knowledgeable woman for somebody who wasn't typically educated the way we know it. And so she was really the one. And then a lot of it trial and error. I lost a lot of money in my lifetime, building businesses, all that kind of stuff. And then finally just asking myself the question, I stumbled upon a book, and this book was talking about meaning and purpose in businesses. I found it fascinating. It's called the meaning. I think it's called the Search for Meaning in Business or something like this. It's an older book, and they gave a statistic, which today it's a very famous statistic, but back then it was novel. And they said something to the effect of 64% of employees are not performing, in their jobs. 90% of employers are not satisfied with their employees. Something like at the time, $450 billion is lost in potential revenue. And I look to myself and I'm like, that's in 1994. That's a crazy statistic. What is it today? And this is like 2000 and something, I forget, 2010, 2000. I look at the numbers and they haven't changed. And I look at these numbers all the time. Here's the latest stats, right? 70% of employees are not engaged. 90% of employers not happy. $700 billion in lost potential revenue. 25% of people are now quitting. $1 trillion is being spent on this attainment and retainment of employees. And my mind just boggles. And I'm like, we're going in the wrong direction, fellas, turn this boat around. You ain't doing this right, And so I decided that I felt my life mission was to reverse those numbers.
Well, let me ask you that then. Numbers are frightening, as you said, and they're growing. How do you reverse those numbers?
So my research shows, so this is actually the basis of the doctorate that I'm writing, is that we lost the aspect of humans in business. Business, if we look at corporations, I'm not going to go through the whole history lesson, but basically we stepped away from the human component. Like, hey, you have eggs, I have milk, let's do business, We stepped away from that, and today it's very much a cog in the wheel. Which part of the assembly line are you part of? Is pretty much how that eventually evolved. We have to bring back the humanity part in that business. And so my research shows people feel like they're not appreciated at work. They feel they're just a cog in the wheel. Show more, value in your employees. The second component is that people are overlooked for opportunity. People want to grow. They don't want to stay in one place. People don't do well in stagnant situations. Find ways of how to, promote your employees and have ways to make them grow. That's the second component. And the third component is people are human first before that they're employees. They have lives, they have wives, they have children, they have hobbies, they have desires, they have doctor appointments, they have a life outside of work. And we can't expect them to be a slave in our environment. So providing them resources and support systems goes a long way. So once again, once we focus on the people component and everything human about the people, research shows that your productivity goes up by 30 to 40%, and that usually affects the bottom line. So your profitability and your value goes up by 30 to 40%.
Let me put you on the spot just on that last point. It's a fascinating point. How do you go about doing that? In other words, let's say we agree with you, and philosophically, you have to agree with you. Makes sense. I'm a business owner. I've run the business for 20 years. It's been relatively successful. How do I make this shift? All of a sudden, I met with this guy, and he said, I should be doing this. How do I change things? And can be done overnight almost. What do you do?
Well, nothing is ever done overnight, right. Obviously. Yeah. Our estimate is anywhere between 18 months to about 24 and sometimes up to 3 years is our estimate of how long. Depends on the size of the business. You're talking about organizations and across, policies across organizations. We've successfully done it to 3 businesses so far in our 3 years that we're running this current business. And it took anywhere between 18 months and 24 months to implement these things successfully. One was not successful, and that business shut down. But anyhow, so the simple answer, the easy answer is just hire me, because we do have tools, we do have, we built a plethora of resources and systems that implement these things, and obviously all of them are customizable to the needs and to the needs of the organization. Every organization is different, so it's not a cookie cutter.
So let's say we hire you. Got you on that. Great answer to a question. One of the best answers I've heard in a long time. Thank you. But we hire you. Give me one thing you would tell me to start doing, if not tomorrow, soon.
Well, actually, the very first thing we do once we're hired is called an organizational assessment. That's the very first thing. We need to gauge the temperature of the business. My goal personally as Jeremy, when I come in, I want to see the business through the lens of the leadership. So I want to see the business exactly the way they see it. And we spend a lot of time, I invest a lot of energy into trying to get the picture the most accurate possible. That's that partnership component of it. And then what we really want to do is, in a sense, dissect. So my background is also in therapy. So I at one point I wanted to become a therapist. So I psychoanalyze the business in a sense, using my education in the therapy world, to really figure out exactly at the core where's the business at, and then we give suggestions on, here are some issues and here are some challenges that we see in the business, and then we prioritize where do we invest our time and energy in the most sustainable and logical and easiest way to focus on these problems particularly, and hopefully sometimes problems fix other problems, etc.
Let me talk about perhaps the biggest one I see in this part of the country where you are, but it's everywhere in the country, and that we get all these things we want to work with and turn the business around, but oftentimes it becomes the problem of finding and keeping good employees. Simpler, it's an easy thing to say, but in reality, it's hard to put into practice. And I'll just ask you as an example, kind of, and I'll ask you a comment on it. But every day for the last 3 years, we pass this one luncheonette where we go to all the time, and we love it. but now hiring cooks
Mm-hmm.
and dishwashers. And for 3 years, they haven't taken the sign down.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with that?
You know, let me ask you this. I'll be just curious, and this would
Right.
be a great case study. Um, right now they actually have a line cook because, well, they're giving you food, right?
Right. Yeah.
I would actually find a way to ask that line cook, hey, how's life? How's everything going? How's everything doing? And you know, it's funny because actually, according to psychology, within 30 seconds, people talk about their profession. So most likely the person's gonna be like, ah, oh, this job is so terrible. Ah, oh, this bossy, what he expects, and I'm the only line cook, and what, you know? If imagine we could turn that around. Imagine that cook would be like, oh man, my boss is the coolest guy in the world. He's the
Wow.
man, he's the man. He takes care of me. You know, the other day I was short on rent and he advanced me some rent. And you know, my car broke down the other day. He spoke to his friend, the mechanic, fixed me up. And imagine the guy talking like this. And then you'd be like, yeah, so why are they still asking for line cooks? Oh, they're still looking for, hey, I could really use the help of my line cooks. Don't you have a friend who's also a line cook? Maybe he'd come join you. Oh, for sure. Of course. I want my friend John to come work with me. All of a sudden, this line cook is the guy who's going to go find you your other line cook. You know,
Have you seen that happen?
absolutely. All the time.
Great example, though. Just go to the people. Who would have thunk, that are working there and seeing their level of satisfaction. What I hear you saying, Jeremy, it's not necessarily always about money. I'm hearing you say there's a lot more than just the salary you're paying this person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I actually spoke to a lot of people. There's one client that we had. She spent so much money in benefits. And you know, I'm sorry, but this was a religious institution. This one particular place, they did insurance, and the majority of their insurance brokers were religious people. And I looked through her thing, and I'm like, they have abortion stuff and everything, and I'm like, that's great for some companies, you know, congratulations. But I looked at her and I was like, do actually religious people use this? And she looked at it and she's like, I never even knew it was in my policy. She didn't
Right.
even know, you know. And she's like, you're right, nobody uses it here, you know. So I said, so why are you paying for it? And why are you paying for it? And why are they paying for it? So there's so many times when you know, and the point I'm trying to make here is that there's so many companies are so focused on benefits, when sometimes something as little as like, hey, there's a lot of singles in our business. Maybe we're asking too much of them. Maybe if we could provide a time where they could actually go date, maybe we put in a matchmaker, maybe something like that, you know, like that kind of benefit, which by the way, that's part of our solutions. That's part of the stuff that we do. And you see your company turn around. This particular client, this lady, she saved $2 million in 1 year by simply reassessing her benefits and reassessing her stuff. And her productivity went flying out of the roof. So her bottom line is doing very well right now.
And it's back to what you said earlier. It's kind of asking the right questions,
Mm-hmm.
and asking the right questions to the right people, as opposed to just what
Sure.
I see too many companies do. They just kind of think of the answers themselves, but never consider who's going to benefit from them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got another problem, Jeremy, that every company I know of is having, and that's not only in terms of hiring people, but also quitting. People are
Mm-hmm.
leaving jobs um, in droves. Is there
Yep.
a way to get around that problem?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the first thing is that is the current, you know, the latest
Right.
Gallup poll is that 25%, that's 1 in 4 employees are either quitting, have quit, or are planning to quit. And I mean, society, like right now like if you open up Forbes, if you open up these kind of magazines, there's a term being thrown around called quiet quitting or something like this, which basically means people are only doing what they have to do at work and nothing more and nothing less. And you know, something like this, which basically is they're there for the paycheck and that's about it. And don't ask me for anything more. So yeah, this is a huge problem, which by the way is not new. Okay, so
Right.
many people are blaming COVID for it. Oh, people are used to staying at home and now they don't want to come back to the office and now they're too comfortable. You know, government was paying checks and whatever. All these, like, you hear them all, right? You know, this is a discussion since the 70s, believe it or not, since the Toyota model. Okay. Toyota model was just one guy who figured out, a model, but there were other, of his colleagues. By the way, they were all American professors. There were other American colleagues who said, maybe that's not the best system, okay? And they were speaking about other systems. I often like to say, use the analogy, these are like the grandparents of, like my industry. These were people up on a penthouse in Miami Beach overlooking to the ocean, and they were seeing this tiny little ripple, from afar, and then in the 90s, so the stuff that I learned, these are people that started seeing a wave. By the time I was already a student, and when I was learning all this stuff, I'm seeing significant waves are coming. Like it's stormy weathers are coming. All my articles are written on exactly what we see today. And then all the beautiful coaches and consultants that came out of nowhere, thanks to COVID, are all seeing the tsunami. That's where we're at today. So what started off as a tiny little ripple grew into this big storm, is now a tsunami. That's what we're seeing today. So absolutely, there are solutions for it as old as time, in a sense. There's so much research in it. Just look at leadership. If you only Google search leadership, how much is going to come out? And at the end of the day, it burns down to leadership at the end of the day.
You mentioned your articles. I'd be interested in reading more, finding out more. You've written stuff that people can find?
Yeah. So we're actually, now I'm starting to take them out. I was immigrating from Canada to here. So for 13 years, I wasn't allowed to work, and I had to primarily focus on school and other stuff like this. So I wasn't legally allowed to publish any of this stuff. So now it's all the stuff that I've written over the course of 13 years is slowly getting published now. So about 2 articles a week or so.
Okay, where can people find them?
So either on LinkedIn or my website. So again, Jeremy Kirkus on LinkedIn or jeremykirkus.com.
Okay, and I'll find a bunch of articles you've written.
Yep.
Just as an example, mention one that people, or I should look up, or somebody should look up, one that you're proud of.
What's your interest? What are you interested in?
What's your most popular article?
The one that I speak about the most,
right,
is actually right now we're bringing it out. A lot of times people don't really understand what an organizational assessment is.
Sure.
They get scared by that. It is actually the only thing that I actually charge up front when people hire me, because a lot goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it. My business model is a partnership, so I take a percentage of the work that I do. But organizational assessment, a lot of people struggle understanding what that is, particularly around the people component. So I'm writing a lot about people and a lot about what makes people tick. So people are sad. A lot of people are, like, especially now in the last couple of years, people are just not happy at work. People are dealing with like contentions. People are dealing with traumas. People are dealing, in our family, unfortunately, as of this recording, 3 people died just this last month. So it's very difficult. People are going through a lot in life, especially in the last couple of years. So how does leadership deal with the mental health of their employees, which, by the way, a lot of them don't, unfortunately, and I highly encourage them to see it, because that directly affects how they work. So I would say that's one of my most famous articles, is something about happiness at work.
And such a good point. The employer who doesn't even care about any of this stuff, or that doesn't ask about it, and that they wonder why, back to your earlier discussion, people leave or people quit. And now you might find a little bit of a tip on that. Talk about the book you're writing. So you mentioned you're finishing up this book. What gave you the idea to write a book, and when do we see that being published?
Yeah. So a lot of so it's a great question. A lot of the people that I started working with were like, "Oh, that's impossible. Oh, no, that's impossible. Oh, it's that simple. I just have to focus on my employees. Oh, no, that's impossible. Like, I need a solution that actually drives sales, right?" And then I hear this all the time. Like, it's the number one objection I always get. And I tell them, okay, let me tell you about the last time somebody told me that something was impossible. And I often tell them the story about my wife, or I often tell them the story about, I don't know, how I met Mark Cuban, for example, how I met all these like incredible people. I had 10 years of work in the prison system when I was considering becoming a therapist. I worked with celebrities. I've worked with so many incredible people. I produced a film in my lifetime, like there
And
were
now, by
so
the
many
way,
incredible
most
things.
importantly, you've been on Blaine's World too.
Yes,
So
and
now
yes,
you made the
absolutely.
big time. So
There we
anyway,
are,
so we're saying, so
So
they tell you that, and then you tell them it is possible. By the
mhm.
way, you have your title for your book. I don't know, you may already have it, but I love the title. That's impossible. I don't know if
It's
you
called For the
consider it.
Love of Success.
What's
So
it called?
it's called For the Love of Success.
I love it.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be said like this. I'm sorry. It's supposed to be like, for the love of success. That's how it's supposed to be said.
Okay, we'll give them a tutorial on how to say that'd be funny. They get the book, and you also get
How to say it, how to read it.
a DVD. I love it, or something. That's a great line.
Yeah.
To recap, if folks want to get in touch with you for a variety of reasons, one, they want to find out some of the articles you've written. They want to find out about some of the work you do with clients. Best bet was, you said, LinkedIn. How do they find you?
Mm-hmm. So LinkedIn, Yermi Kirkus, YERMI. Kirkus is KURKUS, or the website. So Yermi Kirkus, YERMIKURKUS. It's one word. .com. So that's the easiest way.
And I can only tell people, if they're listening to the show or watching it, you're going to find this guy has a lot of ideas, and I love it. I'll kind of tie back to what you said, and it's a great way to help people. You'll help them find solutions to some of their problems, but I guess more importantly, you'll help them, I guess, identify their problems before they can even solve them.
Well, our approach is that we don't solve any problems. I honestly don't know. We are partners, and every entrepreneur has to go through the hardships that they have to go through. I often tell people, look at Elon Musk, for example. Some may not like him, but that's okay. But just look at the man. The guy has built so many businesses, has so much experience, and look at the businesses he's built over the course of time. And just now he took over this Twitter thing, and look at all the hardships. It's as if he's never started up a business in his life, But my bets are he knows a thing or two, and let's talk in 3 to 5 years from now. So, so the answer is simple. It's that I don't have the solution, but I will partner up with you, and we will do whatever it takes to find the right answer that's right for you. And it's your business, your deal, and I'm here to make that happen.
And Yermi Kirkus, I hope we speak before 3 to 5 years go by.
Absolutely.
Or certainly when the book comes out, I want to talk to you about then. Hopefully I'll meet you sometime in person. I'd like to thank you for being my guest this edition of Blaine's World podcast. Also thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and we'll see you soon. Do me a favor, as we sign off, stay with me, and we can just wrap off when we're not on the air. Thanks, man.